Imagine a man weighed down by a past so dark, murder, sorcery, betrayal, that redemption seems impossible. Yet he dares to seek it. This is Milarepa, a sinner turned saint, guided by Marpa, a master whose harsh trials hide a deeper truth. Ever wondered how far you'd go to transform your life? What if your greatest pain could become your path to freedom? In this video, we'll unravel the legendary bond between Milarepa and Marpa, revealing how brutal challenges forged a spiritual giant. Perfect for those new to Buddhism, this story shows how the Dharma turns darkness into light. Stick with us to discover timeless lessons for your own journey. What's a challenge you've faced that shaped who you are? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear. Hit that subscribe button and let's dive into a tale that'll leave you inspired. The Weight of Stone. The wind howled across the Tibetan plateau, carrying whispers of ancient truths through the jagged peaks and into the heart of a man named Milarepa, a soul burdened by shadows. His past was a tapestry of darkness, acts of vengeance, sorcery, and bloodshed that stained his spirit like ink on sacred cloth. Yet within him burned a flicker of longing, a quiet ache for redemption that no storm could extinguish. Have you ever felt such a pull, a yearning so deep it seems to call from beyond this lifetime? Milarepa did, and it led him to the feet of Marpa, the gruff, enigmatic master whose gaze could pierce through lifetimes of delusion. Their meeting was no accident. It was a collision of destinies, a moment where the weight of karma met the promise of liberation. What unfolds between them is not merely a story of teacher and student, but a journey that beckons us to look within, to ask, what are we willing to endure for the truth? Milarepa arrived at Marpa's doorstep, his body weary from travel, his heart heavy with the sins of his youth. He had heard of Marpa, the translator sage, a man who carried the golden teachings of India's greatest masters. Marpa was no ordinary teacher. His presence was a fire, fierce and unyielding, capable of burning away illusion or consuming the unprepared. Picture this: a rugged dwelling in the Lodrak Valley, its stone walls kissed by frost, and Marpa, broad-shouldered, his eyes glinting with a knowing that seemed to unravel Milarepa's every secret. The young seeker bowed, his voice trembling as he pleaded for teachings to cleanse his soul. But Marpa did not offer gentle words or a warm embrace. Instead, he laughed, a sound that echoed like thunder across the cliffs, and dismissed him. Why such harshness? Why would a master turn away a desperate soul? Stay with me, for this is where the mystery begins to unfold, where the path to awakening reveals its thorns. Marpa's refusal was not rejection, but the first strike of a chisel against the stone of Milarepa's pride. He demanded tasks, not of the mind but of the body and spirit, tasks that seemed cruel, even senseless. Build a tower, Marpa commanded, a towering structure of stone on a barren hill. Milarepa, eager to prove his devotion, hauled rocks under the biting sun, his hands bleeding, his back aching, only to be told to tear it down and start again. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? The confusion, the flicker of doubt that might have crept into his heart? Yet something kept him there, a spark that refused to fade. Perhaps it was the memory of his mother's suffering, or the ghosts of his past crimes, or maybe, just maybe, a whisper from within that said, "This is the way." And so, he built again, stone by stone, only for Marpa to demand it be undone once more. Each task was a mirror, reflecting Milarepa's inner turmoil, forcing him to confront the karma he had woven through acts of hatred and sorcery. Have you ever faced a trial that felt unfair, yet sensed it was shaping you in ways you couldn't yet see? The rhythm of labor became Milarepa's meditation, each stone a prayer, each collapse a lesson in surrender. Marpa's methods were not born of cruelty, but of a profound understanding of the human heart. He knew that Milarepa's sins, murder, betrayal, the dark arts, had bound his mind in chains only relentless effort could break. The towers were not mere structures, they were metaphors, each one a step toward dismantling the ego that clung to Milarepa like a shadow. And oh, how Marpa wielded his authority, his voice booming with commands that tested not just Milarepa's strength but his faith. There were moments when despair clawed at the young man's resolve. Picture him, alone at dusk, the wind carrying his quiet sobs as he sat among the ruins of yet another tower. Yet, in those moments of breaking, something new was being forged. Have you ever felt yourself unravel, only to discover a deeper strength waiting beneath? This is the alchemy of the path, the secret Marpa knew, and Milarepa was beginning to learn. As the days turned to months, Marpa's demands grew stranger, more relentless. He sent Milarepa to distant villages, to beg for food, to face scorn and rejection from those who whispered of his dark past. Sorcerer, they called him, their eyes cold with judgment. Each insult was a blade, yet Marpa's teachings were clear. Face the pain, let it burn, let it purify. Milarepa returned, his body thinner, his spirit raw, but his eyes brighter, as if the weight of his karma was beginning to lift. Marpa watched, his stern face betraying nothing, yet within him stirred a quiet pride. He saw what Milarepa could not, the slow unraveling of delusion, the emergence of a heart capable of holding the Dharma. But the trials were far from over. Why such persistence? Why push a man to the edge of his endurance? Because, dear reader, the path to awakening is not a gentle slope, but a mountain, and Marpa was guiding Milarepa to its peak, step by agonizing step. Can you feel the tension, the pull to know what comes next? The turning point came not in triumph, but in vulnerability. One day, after yet another tower lay in ruins, Milarepa fell to his knees before Marpa, his body broken, his voice a whisper. "I can do no more," he said, tears carving paths through the dust on his face. "If you will not teach me, let me die here." The air grew still, the world holding its breath. Marpa's eyes softened, just for a moment, and in that silence something shifted. He did not offer comfort, not yet, but he spoke of the Dharma, of the impermanence of all things, of the power of devotion to burn away the past. For the first time, Milarepa felt the weight of his teacher's compassion, hidden beneath the trials like a river beneath stone. This was no ordinary bond, it was a sacred pact, forged in struggle, tempered by trust. Marpa's harshness was not punishment but a fire to refine the raw ore of Milarepa's soul. Have you ever glimpsed such love disguised as challenge, urging you to become more than you thought possible? And so, the first chapter of their journey closes not with answers, but with a promise. Milarepa, still raw, still tested, stood at the threshold of transformation. Marpa, the unrelenting guide, held the key to teachings that could light the way to liberation, but only if Milarepa could endure. The towers, the toil, the tears, they were not the end, but the beginning. A crucible for a man destined to become one of Tibet's greatest saints. What lies ahead? What trials await? And how will they shape the soul of this broken yet unyielding seeker? Stay with me, for the story deepens, pulling us into the heart of the Dharma, where every struggle is a step toward the light. The path is long, but oh how it calls to us, urging us to keep walking, to keep seeking, to keep believing in the possibility of awakening, the cave of shadows. The stars hung low over Lodrak, their light a faint promise against the vast darkness, much like the hope that flickered in Milarepa's heart. He stood at the edge of yet another ruined tower, the stones scattered like fragments of his former self. Marpa's commands had not softened. If anything, they grew sharper, cutting deeper into the layers of pride and pain Milarepa carried. Have you ever stood at such a crossroads where every fiber of your being screams to give up, yet something intangible urges you forward? For Milarepa, that something was the faint glow of the Dharma, a truth Marpa guarded like a flame in a storm. The Master's eyes, fierce as ever, held a challenge: endure, transform, become. And so, the trials continued, each one a thread in the tapestry of awakening, pulling Milarepa closer to a truth he could not yet name. Let's walk with him through the dust and the doubt to see where this path leads. Marpa's next demand was not a tower but a journey, a pilgrimage of sorts, though it felt more like exile. He sent Milarepa to a remote cave, high in the mountains where the air was thin and the silence deafening. "Meditate there," Marpa said, his voice like gravel. "Face yourself." No scriptures, no rituals, just a sack of barley and a command to sit with his own mind. Can you imagine the weight of that solitude? Milarepa climbed, his body aching from months of labor, his heart raw from rejection. The cave was a jagged wound in the mountainside, its darkness a mirror to his own. He sat, cross-legged, the cold seeping into his bones, and for the first time he met the ghosts of his past. The faces of those he had harmed, the screams of a village he had cursed. They rose like shadows, clawing at his resolve. Yet, in that same darkness, there was a whisper, a teaching Marpa had planted. Observe, do not cling. Have you ever faced your own shadows, trembling yet curious, wondering what lies beyond the fear? Days bled into weeks, and the cave became both prison and sanctuary. Milarepa's body grew lean, his skin clinging to bones as the barley dwindled. Hunger sharpened his senses, and in the stillness he began to hear the rhythm of his own breath, the pulse of life itself. Marpa had not abandoned him. This was the next trial, a crucible of the mind. The Master knew that karma is not erased by deeds alone, but by seeing, truly seeing, the nature of the self. Milarepa's meditations were clumsy at first, his thoughts a storm of regret and longing. But slowly, like water wearing down stone, clarity emerged. He saw how his actions had rippled, how his anger had bound him. And in that seeing there was pain, but also release. Isn't it strange how truth can hurt and heal in the same breath? The cave, once a place of torment, became a womb, birthing a new awareness in Milarepa's heart. When he returned, gaunt and weathered, Marpa's gaze was unreadable. "Build again," he said, pointing to a new hill. No praise, no acknowledgement of the months spent in solitude. Milarepa's heart sank, yet there was a difference now. A quiet strength, a trust that Marpa's harshness was not cruelty but a map to liberation. The stones felt heavier this time, the sun more relentless, but Milarepa moved with a purpose he hadn't known before. Each rock he lifted was a prayer, each step a surrender to the path. The villagers, once scornful, began to whisper of the madman who built and unbuilt towers, yet some saw a light in his eyes, a radiance that defied his tattered form. Marpa watched from afar, his silence louder than words. What was he seeing in his student? What hidden potential was he nurturing? The answer lies in the next moment, a pivot that draws us deeper into their sacred dance. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of dusk, Marpa called Milarepa to his side. The Master's wife, Damama, stood nearby, her gentle presence a counterpoint to Marpa's fire. She had watched Milarepa's trials with a mother's heart, her quiet kindness a balm to his wounds. But Marpa's voice cut through the softness. "You carry death on your shoulders," he said, his words like a blade. "Your karma is a storm, and only the Dharma can still it. He handed Milarepa a scroll, not of teachings but of tasks, more errands, more humiliations, more steps into the unknown. Milarepa's hands trembled as he took it, yet his eyes held a spark, a defiance born not of pride but of faith. He was beginning to understand. Marpa's trials were not punishment but a forge, shaping him for a purpose greater than he could yet grasp. Have you ever felt such a moment, where the weight of a challenge reveals a glimpse of your own strength? The scroll sent Milarepa across valleys and rivers, to beg, to serve, to face the world's disdain. Each encounter was a lesson, each rejection a chance to loosen the grip of ego. In one village, a merchant spat at him, calling him a fraud. Milarepa bowed, not in shame but in gratitude, for the insult showed him how far he had come. The anger that once ruled him was quieter now, like a fire reduced to embers. Marpa's teachings, though unspoken, were sinking deep. The path to awakening is paved with humility, with the courage to face one's own darkness. As Milarepa returned, his steps lighter despite his exhaustion, he felt a shift. The world was no longer his enemy, it was his teacher, just as Marpa was. Can you sense the power in that realization? The way it changes everything, like dawn breaking over a long night? And so, the second leg of this journey draws to a close, not with resolution but with a deepening mystery. Milarepa, once a man of vengeance, was becoming something else, a vessel for the Dharma, shaped by trials that tested body, mind, and soul. Marpa, the unrelenting guide, saw what Milarepa could not, the potential for a saint, hidden beneath layers of karma. The path was far from over, the trials far from complete. What new challenges await? How will this bond between teacher and student evolve? And what truths will it reveal? Stay with me, for the story is far from finished, and the light of awakening grows brighter with each step, calling us to follow, to witness, to believe in the transformative power of the Dharma, the Song of Light. The dawn broke over Lodrak, its golden light spilling across the valley, touching the scars of Milarepa's hands as he knelt before yet another half-built tower. His body was a map of endurance, calloused, lean, marked by years of labor and solitude. Yet his eyes burned with a quiet fire, a clarity forged in the crucible of Marpa's unrelenting guidance. The trials had stripped him bare, peeling away the layers of guilt and pride that once defined him. Have you ever stood at the edge of yourself, where the past falls away and something new begins to rise? For Milarepa, this was that moment, though he could not yet see its full shape. Marpa, the master whose harshness was a hidden compassion, stood watching, his silence heavy with expectation. The final steps of this journey were near, and they would demand everything Milarepa had left. Let's follow him through the last trials to the heart of a transformation that echoes across centuries. Marpa's next command was not a task of stone or travel, but a confrontation with the mind itself. He called Milarepa to a small room in his home, where the air was thick with the scent of incense and the weight of truth. "Sit," Marpa said, his voice softer now, yet no less commanding. "Look within and tell me what you see." No stones to carry, no caves to endure, just the vast, uncharted territory of Milarepa's own heart. He closed his eyes and the world fell away. The memories came first, sharp and unyielding. The village he had cursed, the lives he had shattered, the weight of his mother's tears. But now, instead of fleeing, he stayed. Marpa's teachings had taught him this much: to face the pain, to let it pass through like wind through an open window. Can you feel the courage it takes to sit with your own darkness, to neither fight nor flee but simply witness? In that stillness, Milarepa began to see, not just his sins, but the impermanence of all things, the way suffering arises and dissolves like mist. Days turned to nights, and Milarepa sat, his breath a steady anchor. Marpa visited, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent, his presence a reminder that the path was not walked alone. He spoke of the Buddha's truth, that clinging is the root of suffering, that liberation lies in letting go. Milarepa listened, and for the first time, the words were not just sounds, but seeds, taking root in the fertile ground of his heart. The Master's harsh trials, the towers, the cave, the endless errands, had prepared him for this. They had broken the shell of his ego, leaving him open, raw, ready to receive. And receive he did. Visions came in the silence, light that was not light, a vastness that held both joy and sorrow. He saw his karma not as a chain, but as a teacher, guiding him toward freedom. Have you ever glimpsed such a truth where the very things that bind you become the keys to your release? When Milarepa emerged, he was changed. His face, once etched with despair, now carried a quiet radiance. Marpa saw it, and for the first time, a smile broke across his stern features. "You have begun," he said, and those words were a thunderclap, a recognition that shook Milarepa to his core. But the Master was not done. He handed Milarepa a tattered robe and a staff, symbols of a new phase. "Go to the mountains," Marpa said. "Live as the yogis of old. Let the Dharma be your food, your shelter, your all. No more towers, no more tasks, just the vast, open path of practice." Milarepa bowed, his heart full, not with pride, but with gratitude. He understood now. Marpa's trials were not punishments, but gifts, each one a step toward awakening. Can you imagine such devotion, such trust, in a path that demands everything yet promises the infinite? Milarepa retreated to the highlands, to caves where snow whispered secrets and the stars sang of eternity. There, he lived on nettles and air, his body wasting away, his spirit soaring. The villagers who once scorned him now came as pilgrims, drawn by tales of a green-hued yogi whose songs carried the Dharma's truth. For Milarepa had found his voice, not the voice of sorcery, but of poetry, of songs that wove the pain of his past into teachings of liberation. He sang of impermanence, of compassion, of the mind's boundless potential. And in those songs, Marpa's presence lingered, the Master who had seen the saint within the sinner. Their bond, forged in struggle, had become a bridge to awakening, a testament to the power of a teacher who dares to push and a student who dares to trust. Have you ever felt such a connection, where another's faith in you reveals your own hidden light? As years passed, Milarepa's name spread, not as a sorcerer but as Tibet's greatest yogi, a beacon of the Dharma. Marpa, now older, his fire tempered by time, would hear of his students' songs and nod, his work complete. The trials had done their work. They had purified Milarepa's karma, not by erasing it, but by transforming it into wisdom. The towers, the caves, the meditations, they were all part of a greater alchemy, turning a man of darkness into a vessel of light. And what of us, walking our own paths, facing our own trials? Milarepa's story whispers to us, the obstacles we face, the teachers who challenge us, the moments that break us, they are not the end, but the beginning. They are the forge where our truest selves are shaped. Can you hear it, that call to keep going, to trust that every step, no matter how painful, leads toward awakening? And so, the tale of Milarepa and Marpa closes, not with an end, but with a beginning, a legacy that lives in every heart that dares to seek the truth. The winds of Lodrak still carry their story, a reminder that the path is not easy, but it is true. Milarepa, once a man of vengeance, became a saint through trials that tested his very soul. Marpa, the unrelenting guide, showed us that love can wear the face of hardship, that compassion can demand everything, their bond, their journey, their triumph. It calls to us, urging us to look within, to face our own shadows, to walk the path with courage. Where will your path lead? What trials will shape you, and what light will you find? The Dharma waits, patient and vast, ready to guide you home.